Sunday is the bird who cannot fly. Throughout the story of Penacony, we're introduced to this idea of a bird locked up in a gilded cage. The land of dreams was practically a gilded cage for many dream chasers. Numerous NPCs claim that they would rather stay in this sweet dream than face the harsh reality that awaits them once they wake up. Sunday was a victim of this mindset too. He saw just how ugly and cruel life could be even before he was ready to understand the gravity of it. The strong will always conquer the weak. The righteous will always pretend they're above the sinners. The unfairness of it all drove him to seek a different path to fulfill a promise made by a trustful boy to a guileless girl. And unbeknownst to Sunday, it led to him becoming trapped within the cage of his own making, unable to break free from it, even if he wanted to try. All this makes Sunday a beautifully crafted character, a nuanced antagonist whose ideals and philosophies many of us can understand and relate to. Stringing together a few of the broken melodies that make up his character is what I'm trying to do in this video. This is my ode to Sunday. Part 1. The Trustful Boy. Sunday is the older brother of Robin. They lost their mother during a Stellaron tragedy that threatened to consume the dreamscape. They couldn't do anything but watch as their mother melted into the Memoria Zone, and something like that can haunt you for the rest of your life. But people deal with trauma in many different ways. Well, Robin chose to move on by giving hope to those who are suffering through her music, much like their mother did when she sang to them and held them close. Sunday never forgot about the overwhelming fear that he felt that day. More than likely, he blamed himself for being weak, for being unable to protect his mother from this terrible fate, even if what happened was completely out of his control. He was just a child after all. There was nothing he could have done to save her. But he would carry the survivor's guilt until the bitter end, allowing it to warp his personality into something so far twisted from how he used to be. It also didn't help them when the siblings were adopted by the Dream Master. He did so because he had an agenda, not because it was out of the goodness of his heart. He saw them as twin children of the Order, useful for his plans that involved sacrificing one of them to revive a dead god. And while the Dream Master claimed that Robin was always meant to be the chosen one, I have an inkling that he was just being manipulative about it. The Dream Master likely knew that Sunday would never allow anything that would harm his sister, so he must have always banked on Sunday offering himself up for tribute. I believe the Dream Master recognized Sunday's weak heart and targeted him from the very start. Besides, if you remember the 3 choices that Sunday asked us to think about just so we can see his perspective, who do you think put him in that position? Who allowed the siblings to see the consequences of their choice to keep the Charmony dove safe in a cage until it was strong enough to crash into Robin's window? Who appointed him as the Bronze Melodia and let him experience what happens when he tries to be kind? Who told him about what happened to Robin when she was touring a planet where war had broken out? Something that Robin herself hid from Sunday because she knew how much it would terrify him. The Dream Master was someone Sunday felt indebted to, someone Sunday trusted to have their best interests in mind. But the Dream Master never saw Sunday as anything more than just someone he could use. The Dream Master pushed him into a downward spiral until all of his worst traits were magnified. This man enabled his self-destructive tendencies rather than guide him into the right path, claiming that Sunday was so smart whenever his own actions and opinions led him astray. And because Sunday was so isolated at this point, what with Robin leaving Penacony to travel across the stars, he had no one else he could trust, not even himself. So just like a bird with clipped wings, Sunday was unable to escape from this situation, and thus this trustful boy can only find solace in a sweet dream. Part 2. The Bird Who Cannot Fly. Perhaps the most fascinating thing about Sunday's character is a contradiction. The 2.2 Trailblaze Quest shows us that Sunday possessed a rather bleak and pragmatic outlook on life, as evidenced by his conversations with Robin while they waited for the Dream Master. His philosophies revolved around the concept of survival and the harsh realities of existence, both in the dream world and in the real world. He acknowledged the limitations that came with what Penacony had to offer, recognizing that while the dreamscape may provide temporary relief, it couldn't really solve everyone's problems that were rooted in reality. He was also resigned to the idea that inequality and suffering are inherent in life. He would go on to suggest that not everyone had a future, and that some people were just destined to suffer due to circumstances beyond their control. He probably thinks like this because of his mother's death. He couldn't save her, so why should he believe that everyone could save themselves? Her death was likely the major reason why he had a fatalistic perspective. always believing that birds will just crash to their deaths, regardless of what anyone did. He blamed himself for something that was out of his control, and he spent his entire life atoning for something that was never his fault. How helpless he felt that day led to his obsession with control. It also tempted him into following the path of the Order because its teachings, or rather, the Dream Master's version of it, made things easier for him to deal with life's unpredictability. However, many of the same scenes that showed Sunday's bleak attitude also illuminated the contradiction. His decision to keep the Charmony dove in a cage until it was strong enough to fly away showed his sense of compassion and empathy, and then the Dream Master decided to be a jerk and twist the narrative in such a way that made Sunday's point of view even worse, but that's a whole different essay. Moving on. He wanted to protect the weak so desperately that he was willing to destroy himself in order to do so, not at all bothered with the idea of sacrificing himself to be the lone star that would remain awake just so everyone can enjoy a blissful dream, regardless of their status in life. And while he truly believed that order was necessary to achieve this perfect paradise, he still struggled with the consequences of his actions, often feeling conflicted by the weight of his choices. His kindness was ultimately what made him self-destructive, but it also gave the Trailblazer and the Astral Express an opening to maybe get through to him before it was too late. He even challenged the Trailblazer to sever his path with their own hands if they believed that they could save more people than Sunday. This whole exchange, plus the fact that he even allowed the Astral Express to fight him over it, revealed a small part of him that likely wanted to be proven wrong. He probably wanted the Trailblazer to show him that yes, there is another way, because he could no longer see it on his own. His convictions prevented him from believing in a world where things could get better, but that didn't mean he ever stopped wishing for it. He just couldn't break free from the cage he was trapped in anymore, because he was so scared of what would happen, so he needed a little help. The Trailblazer's words combined with Robin's song were probably the push he needed to take that first terrifying step, but in the end, it will all be up to him if he wants to keep going, but it's not as hopeless as it sounds. A bird with clipped wings will always be afraid of flight, but if they're given the time and the space to heal, their feathers will grow back, and they can learn to fly again. Part 3. The night is still too short. Despite everything that he tried to accomplish, I'm sure many of you can still see that Sunday had good intentions at heart. Why is that? Why can we still view Sunday as someone who is good despite being the villain of this story? Because like many others who have lost hope, Sunday didn't believe he was strong enough to accept a reality that didn't end in happy endings either. He was literally the same as everyone who would rather remain asleep in a sweet dream because they were already convinced that things wouldn't get any better. I'm sure there were days when you felt it was better to escape from your problems rather than face them head on. Sunday never saw that as a weakness. Rather, he viewed it as a necessity more often than not, because as he said countless of times, only heroes are given the means to survive, leaving the weak to crumble under the weight of everything. And when it's put that way, I think you'd find it hard to disagree with the notion that life is truly unfair to those who can't protect themselves. So when Sunday couldn't see a future where the weak would have a fighting chance, he decided to pave the path forward for one, even if it meant trapping everyone in the gilded cage. And I know, you can argue that only evil guys would do something like that, but all he really wanted was to provide a place where everyone could live a happy life, regardless of whether you were weak or strong. A place where the weak wouldn't have to suffer anymore for things that were beyond their control. Plus, he never saw himself as a hero. I think he always knew that not everyone would agree with his actions, but even so, he tried to make us understand by showing us the steps he took along the way. He even asked us if we would make the same choices if we ever found ourselves in a similar position, and I'm sure many of you, just like me and some of the other characters, picked the exact same choices he did. The point is, he's a relatable character. We understand his motivations, his viewpoint, and what he was trying to accomplish. His actions were flawed, but he did the best he could to mitigate failure within his means, even if his execution could have been a lot better. His desire for a perfect world where no one has to suffer like he did is also very human. Besides, who doesn't want 7 days of rest rather than being worn down by a world that isn't looking out for you? And when he gave us his answer to the question that had been asked this entire story, why does life slumber? Why do we dream? He told us that it's because we don't want to wake up. Sunday never wanted to wake up. In her letter, Robin encouraged him to come back to reality more often because she knew how much time Sunday was spending in the dreamscape. He was likely dreaming all this time. unwilling to wake up to a reality where the night will always be too short. But he has to know, because the dream is over. If he wants to live a life meant for himself and himself alone, then he has to face the harsh reality that he's always been afraid of, even if it will be hard. Even if he was okay with falling to his death because he never believed he was worthy of saving, because that outcome was better than dealing with the pain. He has to find a new answer to that question, one that will hopefully help him see that despite all the suffering you can encounter in life, the journey itself is still beautiful, because you will find a way to survive. You will find a way to keep going. Robin saw him as worthy of having the second chance. She wouldn't have caught him as he fell from the skies if she didn't, and maybe one day, he'll believe that too.